Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a fantastic webinar on tap, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for any of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate. Just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions, and we will try to get to as many as we can during the webinar. Also, we do have 2 polling questions during today's webinar, so hopefully we can get you engaged with those. And at the end of today's webinar, we will be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is leveraging value streams for planning in SAFe and beyond. Our speakers today, we have a star-studded lineup of speakers today. First off, we have Helen Beal, who is a Chief Ambassador at a DevOps Institute and Ways of Working coach. Jeff Keyes, who is a VP of Product at Plutora. Siddharth Pareek, who is a VP of Consulting at NatWest Group. And Mark Peters, who's Lead Information Assurance Security Engineer at Technica Corp. Guys and gal, thank you so much for joining me today. It's so great to see all of you. Everybody's smiling faces. Okay, I know, Helen, you're actually going to be kicking off today's conversation. So I am going to turn it over to you, take myself off camera, put myself on mute. I'll see you at the polling question.
Sweet.
Thank you so much, Charlene, and hello, audience. Lovely to have Jeff, Siddharth, and Mark with me today. As Charlene said, we're going to be talking about leveraging value streams for planning in SAFe and beyond. This is webinar 3 of 4 in our VSM, The Secrets Supercharging Agile and DevOps in 2021 series. So last time we had Do You Need Release Management in a DevOps World? We'll tell you what's coming next at the end today. So let's get started. What are we going to talk about today? We are going to talk about the need to scale Agile, the evolution of SAFe, SAFe and DevOps, SAFe and value streams, and SAFe in 2021. And Jeff is going to give us questions live from the audience as and when he sees fit during the course of today. So if you have anything you want to ask, stick it in the chat and Jeff will throw it out to us all, or maybe answer it himself. I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
You could say this webinar was a safe space.
Very dangerous space today. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. So let's get started by thinking about why we are scaling Agile in the first place. So what is going on out there in the industry? So many of you familiar with DevOps will probably have come across Carlos Perez. If you haven't, she is a researcher that her research has basically shown a series of industrial revolutions, and we are currently in the 5th one. These revolutions are economic cycles where there is a turning point, which is characterized by recessions. We are basically on the precipice of a golden age of the 5th revolution. Very interestingly, Carlos Perez has always said that there's a recession in the first 4, there's been one big recession and we come out of that and then it's all brilliant and prosperous and we all come together. She did say that this time we obviously have already had 2 recessions. We had one with the dot-com bubble bursting, and then we had a second one with the global economic crash thanks to basic mortgages. And she did say that she thought we'd have a 3rd. And I was stood on stage about this time last year in Orlando, keynoting at Agile and DevOps East, doing a similar presentation saying, I don't think we'll see a 3rd recession, not being an economist, admittedly, but of course now we are in the middle of the 3rd recession caused by the pandemic. So the good news is that's the 3 recessions done, and now we're going to come out into the golden age of prosperity. But what this means from a SAFe and scaling Agile perspective is that the pressure has been on to disrupt. There has been a lot of technology happening that has been asking people to do things in different ways. And this is a pattern we've seen before. So we asked Siddharth about this in the context of the organisation that he works for, NatWest, which has been around for a really, really long time. And Siddharth was very kind enough to put together a picture of how NatWest has evolved over the last 400 years it has been in existence. So Siddharth, over to you. Talk us through what we're seeing here.
Okay, thanks, Helen. Before I jump on to what NatWest Group has done, a quick overview about what NatWest Group is for the readers out there. So today's NatWest Group is brands are made of hundreds of past banks. They were all different, large and small, city and country, traditional and innovative, and grew to serve the banking needs of the unique communities all over the United Kingdom. For example, NatWest or National Westminster Bank was launched in 1870. Ulster Bank launched in 1836. Scots Bank launched in 1692. Drummond's launched in 1712. Halls in 1809. RBS launched in 1727. So that is a quick overview about the bank or branch I'm talking about, which is NatWest Group. Now, for NatWest Group, customers has been in the forefront always for the bank. And we have worked over the centuries to go further and do better for our customers and to change as our customers are changing, be it going the extra mile for them. So for example, the first the picture that you see is the slender slip of handwritten paper or check, which dated back to 17th century, which was a simple payment instruction from a customer to his cry vendor in order to make payment processes easier and less risky. The next is the world's first overdraft or cash credit way back in 1728, which was considered one of the most ingenious ideas that has been executed in commerce. Third is when in 1800s, economy was permanently short of coins, Scottish Bank supported their customers, including RBS, by issuing £1 notes, and RBS, as on date, is the sole issuer of $1 note in Britain today. The fourth is one of a number of responses by banks to the growth of 24-hour society was the introduction and increasing use of the automated machines, or what we call as ATMs, way back in 1967. So NatWest was the first British bank to introduce ATMs or the cash carded in big way. Last but not the least, the Royal Bank of Scotland also has a clear track record when it comes to using emerging technologies. So it became the first British bank to announce a full online banking services way back in 1997. Mobile phone top-ups has also been available in ATM since 2004. So the RBS, the next best thing that they did was they became also the first bank to introduce a completely functioning banking app for smartphones. So this is in short our how we have turned over in last 400 odd years for the customers and by the customers and of the customers.
There's a couple of really important things think you've said there. One is like this need and requirement to continually innovate and be at the forefront of innovation in order to survive. In order to be a 400-year-old company, you have to prove over and over again that you can beat the competition, that you can lead the competition. I also think it's worth thinking about the nature of large enterprises, and it's not just the very large enterprises. I think there are very few organizations that grow purely organically. Most organizations grow through M&A and merger and acquisition. What we end up with then in large enterprises is a lot of micro companies that come together to make a macro company, if you like you described with Ulster Bank and Bank of Scotia and all the pieces that have come together to make up your group. And I think it's really important to think about that when we think about why we're scaling Agile. That is part of the challenge. Jeff, do you see that as well?
Absolutely. Every company's in this journey of trying to take these, and it's really fun, Siddharth, when you talk about legacy processes, you really mean legacy processes. And it's not just the processes, but you can imagine the systems as the technology has evolved. What were some of the early systems that were brought around? What ones didn't make it? What processes changed where other systems got sort of laid out, and the dependencies between all these different systems and delivery methods, with trying to make sure that you don't screw it up, because of course, as technology goes, if you make a mistake here, it's jobs, it's financial risk, in some cases it's legal exposure. So you've got to make sure the right things are happening. And as companies go through this evolution of trying to deliver faster, the pressure comes to still manage all those dependencies, and how do I get to be more agile in the process?
So there is another model for this, the fourth industrial revolution, from the World Economic Forum, that people may be familiar with, which is now also talking about moving into the fifth. So we have these 5 levels. Hopefully Jeff's going to show us in a second on the screen. There we go. So we're in that 5th one with the connection of frontier tech to purpose and inclusivity. So if you're familiar with the World Economic Forum material, you'll see the 5th one here, and same as Carlotta Perez is now talking about the 5th. So all these pressures coming to bear on our companies now. So this idea of Agile came about quite a long time ago. We're going to look at a timeline in a couple of minutes, but before we do that, let's have a look at some of the reasons why we've been talking about scaling Agile up.
Well, and it's interesting to note how when you bring up that slide that where we were talking about offshoring in the 3rd and the 4th, that now as we get into the 5th, we're talking about kind of reshoring and doing, like you said, that on-demand production, making things smaller, which means they have to be agile and you have to be able to pivot to get what you want in terms of value as you move forward into these smaller production items.
So in order to cope with the 5th revolution, cope with that disruption, we have to be adaptable. And therefore that's the origins of Agile. I think that's what you're saying, Mark.
Absolutely.
So I was going to ask you actually to talk us through what's going on in this slide, what we used to talk about. So these perceived Agile fails and your personal experience in seeing these things and when you saw them, and whether you do agree they're things that we've mostly got over. What's your view on these pieces?
So you see a lot of these things, especially as companies, the bigger companies that are trying to adapt, delivering faster and delivering value. The waterfall companies, like a lot of the federal governments and a lot of the bigger companies, we're on a 3, 4, 5 year timeline to get this new software out, these new products out, really, and they can't compete with the waterfall. So they have to move forward. But a lot of those government, those administrations have all been brought up in seeing everything all the time and having these product reports and these standard administrative documents. And Agile gets rid of a lot of those, right? We have the functional software over the comprehensive documentation. And so people are reluctant, and there's a fear from those top levels. And you kind of have to adapt to that in small increments and find a transition framework, like when we talk about SAFE later, that SAFE is a good transition framework that helps those companies adjust. Because what we see is that people go forward, and with the, even the top one, we say lack of upfront versus continuous iterative, you still have to have somebody who's delivering the vision. And Siddharth, I think, will hit it later about the vision for a company, that you can't just do your heads down little bit of planning. You still have to fit that to the overall framework as you go to Agile. So there's a lot of these things that incorporate along the way that you have to do a little bit of each as you're making those transitions.
Taking a hit where Mark is leaving across the government, for the financial organizations like us, the need for change has never been greater, and the ability to change is now critical skill. Now, what happens is, with the portfolios of change becoming increasingly complex and diverse, companies are also under increasing pressure to meet the traditional challenge of cost, regulation, and the structural change. So to transform the company to drive customer relevance, and also to innovate in order to stay ahead of market disruptions and new entrants. For example, the mobile devices now have created powerful tools for customers to perform a universe of financial transactions, and they expect their banks to function like their favorite apps, anytime, anywhere, like your stores and governments. And that is what pushing for a banking finance like us to scale Agile.
Yep. And it's not like, there's other things that come along with that too, because now there's a vision, but that vision needs to get distributed down into the organization. There's an implied, if I'm going to have smaller increments, I need to distribute the plan and the vision throughout people that can make that happen and make the decision making local and and make that happen. Well, that's really hard when the culture of the organization has been so top down that we're going to drive, we're going to set up a vision, we're going to build something. Hey, I'm going to plan out what's going to happen for the next 18 months, and I can just sort of sit and wait to see what, wait for it to get delivered. My only question is, do I need to add more people, or am I getting enough in the amount of resources I've got? Well, all that's different now. I have no idea what's going to come from time to time. And so from a visibility point of view, oh my gosh, how do I see what's happening? Where do I know what's going on?
And Jeff, I think
the problem with that, Jeff, is that many banks and credit unions have become agile organizations. However, they do not see the outcomes they anticipated. And the reason for this is because a top-down directive was the order of shifting to agile. Titles may have changed, and when the C-suite decree came down, but the way they operate has not been altered. The way the lower level managers operate, the way the teams operate, the way the employees operate. And that is one of the reasons that the scaling of agile has failed.
Well, and Jeff, too, it's important to note the difference between planning and vision, right? The vision is we want to deliver value to our customers faster. The planning is this is how we're going to do it. And the organizations that tie to a plan are not tying into that vision necessarily. They're committing to an old factor rather than an agile framework.
Precisely. So what's really fun about this slide is we're really touching on all the problems of why a big organization can't just jump to be a cloud native company. There's culture, there's methodologies, there's and the systems themselves. Oh my gosh, I've got all these dependencies that I can't just break them all up. Hey, poof, everybody's independent, autonomous. Go to pizza team. You're out of here. It's not going to happen. We need something to help bridge the journey and bring us there, which is how we get to this conversation of scaling.
Absolutely.
Next slide, maybe. Yeah, so the conversation about scaling, this is how it's evolved. So we started talking about agility back here in 2001. Actually, we started before that because we were talking about extreme programming and dynamic systems design methodologies or development methodologies, and Scrum was emerging. So we got the Agile Manifesto, and then things have gone apace. And what we really discovered that whilst we like the idea of working in an agile manner, so in these small increments, in these small teams and things, there were lots of things that gave us problems with it in the enterprise, just as the guys were covering. So we started to have conversations about scaling agile back in 2007, but I still feel like it's very much an emerging conversation. You can see SAFe themselves, only 9 years old. We can see disciplined agile, so DAD coming out 2013. We can see we've flagged the 9 State of Agile report here in 2014 because that was the first one where they started to ask about agile at scale frameworks. So only 6 years ago. So no wonder this is a really hot topic and something we're still trying to deal with. This graph here at the end from this year's 14 State of Agile report, this orange piece here is telling us that 35%, so the largest percentage of respondents that reported using a framework reported using SAFe. So in 9 years, it has surfaced to be currently the most widely used framework. However, I think we'd like to learn a little bit more in a little while about what you're using. But before we do that, let's explore a little bit more. Actually, no, before we do that, Siddharth, when did you start getting involved with SAFe?
I get started involving with SAFe, I think 7-8 years back, when I heard there is new framework coming up, which is about not limited to teams, but at the organization level. And it was exciting to hear out because, till that point, I was hearing about extreme programming about teams, Scrum, it was about teams, and DSDM frameworks, which was another agile practice all about teams. So this excited me. At the same time, it said, okay, let me have it because this was something different which talked about at the organization level, not at the team level. So 7 years back is where I started these SAFe practices.
What about you, Mark? When did you first start getting involved with
Well,
SAFE?
I only saw SAFE about 2 years ago with the federal government contractor. And it's kind of interesting to note that along that way, one of the senior Department of Defense professionals for the U.S. actually came back and said, all right, we're not going to use SAFE. We're going to go to all GitOps, right? We're going to move away from this. At the same time, he's saying that the other elements of the DoD is moving back to it because they realize they don't actually have the professional structure and they don't have enough people to make those transitions with the administratively heavy need they need for that federal government, right? That there's so many processes and so many pieces that are in place that have to be transitioned for compliance, for structure, for reporting, and just to manage budgets that they had to make changes along the way. So the teams I'm working with now, I've seen 2 different teams make the transition to SAFE, and they've both had some success in making some of those things, and usually helped by a lot of coaches along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll talk about coaches, no doubt. Let's talk about a bit more about SAFE's evolution then, and where DevOps, you mentioned GitOps, and just where this fits in. So it wasn't called version 1, obviously, in its first version, but we're currently in the 5th version that came out in 2019 of SAFE. But what we really wanted to do here was highlight a couple of things. One thing, the advent of DevOps into the SAFE conversation, which happened between versions 4 and 5. DevOps purists like myself out there will have noticed that CALMS has become calmer. We're going to investigate that in more detail later on in this webinar, but we'll flag that now that arrived, along with things like their DevOps practitioner course. And SAFE is really a combination of different systems of thought. So it really started or launched with Agile and Lean behind it, and then got involved with systems thinking and added design thinking, more recently added DevOps. So it's an amalgamation or a convergence, if you like, of these different schools of thought. But let's just move to the next slide and think about what we're dealing with now. So copy-paste Scrum, Mark. What is copy-paste Scrum?
Copy-paste Scrum is when a team takes a Scrum and says, hey, we have Scrum, therefore we're doing the right things. And one of the things I've seen is that you have a Scrum, you say, all right, we have a Scrum, but we have a Scrum, and one Scrum is doing development, and the next Scrum is doing testing, and the next Scrum is doing configuration management, and the next Scrum is doing tech writers. And you don't really get that cross-functional team that you need to make it work, because you're still handing items from silo to silo instead of making a unique process where you can deliver things all the way from the start and from that initial plan and development all the way to completion in a short period of time.
And why would people, I think I can understand it logically, you'd think that would be a good way to scale things, right? Like it worked here, so we'll just copy that out across the whole organization, right?
So you get that lack of trust or that lack of model, and what you get is that reversion to what they've done before. You say, hey, we're going to have a great team. We've got all these developers, and the developers are going to do all the tech writing because they're going to write the code and they're going to implement the code. We're going to get functional software, and they're going to tell us how to use it, and that's done. And then you have a tech writer somewhere in the organization who says, well, that doesn't really meet the standard we're looking for. That's not really professional tech writing. So somebody has to approve that before it goes forward. Like, well, no, it's good enough. The user has it, right? And they can move it the next time. They can send us comments and we can readjust. Like, no, it has to go to the professional tech writer. And that's where you kind of get, you're not, again, not truly cross-functional. You're handing it off to somebody else to make that approval, which is slowing the process and creating those constraints that block our DevOps flow.
Scrum silos.
Scrum silos, exactly.
What about my Agile is right, Siddharth? Your Agile is wrong. Oh, man, lost him for a moment. Is it me or is it him?
What has happened with us is, and when we're talking about this slide is I would like to talk about the tech-centric Agile for people. What generally people do is they think their A dev team is Agile, their B dev team is Agile, their C dev team is Agile, now their ops team is Agile, and they consider their organization to be Agile, and they have scaled Agile. But the aspect that they missed out is their HR an Agile, the way of working? Are they doing it? Are their procurement working in the Agile fashion or not? Are they vendors doing their Agile way of working or not? And till the time all these I won't say small, but these individual pieces are not agile of not doing agile, but being agile till the time organizations should not score and claim of the organizations being scaled agile. So and that is another trap that many organizations get into. One of the other things that I would like to talk about over here is that uh, there is something for the enterprise architect people. There is a framework known as TOGAF. So TOGAF talks about the business architectural stream, whereas SAFE talks about two value streams. One is the ops value stream, another is the dev value stream. Now, generally within NatWest, what they've done is they have picked up the TOGAF value stream plus the SAFE organizational stream, not the dev value stream, because they think there is a lot of commonality between these two architectural streams. The commonalities are people, organizational, information, and value delivery. Again, why I'm actually calling it out over here is maybe people may have a doubt that should we go with what value stream SAFE talks about? No, you can have marriages between two or more different frameworks of value streams as well with the SAFE per se.
I think we need a different definition for that, Siddharth. I think there's one value, right? But there's different elements that contribute to it. We have to be careful about splitting value into too many pieces and saying, you're doing this piece and you're doing that piece, and they're creating a separate value at the end. They're creating the same value at the end of the day in delivering value to the customer. If you split out too many pieces, you get the people defending their silo rather than contributing to the overall value.
We see that a lot. So, obviously we're a tool vendor, right? We're in the value stream management space. And so we pull together a lot of the planning data. One of the items on here that is particularly noteworthy for me is same tools, different pipelines. So we'll go into a set of customer, a brand new customer and say, okay, well, let's talk through your tooling. What do you have that we can hook into and help give you visibility and so forth? And they say, well, we use Jira and Jenkins. And what's funny about that is they're being used in entirely different ways. So you got one team that's basically running waterfall using Jira. And you have another team that's all the way on the other side, not even doing scaled agile. They're just straight Kanban, happy-go-lucky because they've got their own integrated pipeline and can deliver on demand whenever they want, no dependencies. And they're trying to find visibility across all these things. But the answer is, well, I think we're there because we all use Jira. I get the same answer with Jenkins or everything goes through ServiceNow, and it's just funny how broadly people will look to define their adoption of scaled agile or any other framework as they're scaling agile in the organization.
And Jeff, I don't know if you've seen it, but I find it funny from a compliance perspective that you get these customers that come in and they're like, we've got a pipeline and we run these tests and we've got all these tests. We've got the Sonar Cube in there for the SAST, and we've got the DAST, and we've got the runtime, and we're testing automated using, is it Avocado or something like that? Well, what are the gates you set up for your tests? They said, oh, we set them up to run. And you're like, well, okay, it ran, and then what happened? Like, no, it ran in the pipeline. Well, but what happened? They're like, well, it ran, so the pipeline is good. The pipeline is complete. You're like,
yep.
No, your test failed. Right? It didn't execute the test, even though it ran. They're like, oh, but it made it through the pipeline.
Yeah, or the other one I ran into recently is, oh, we build 20 times a day. Great. How's the unit tests in there going? Unit tests? We don't do them. Anyways, whole other set of topics that we can get to.
I think we're over to a poll by about 8 minutes.
I think we are.
Oh.
Okay, the polling question should be up on your screen now. What scaled agile framework are you using? You can go ahead and choose between SAFE, Scrum of Scrums, DAD, Less, or Other. Go ahead and make your choice. And quick reminder to the audience, while you are making your choice, there's plenty of time for questions. If you do have a question for any of our speakers, go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit it. You don't have to wait till we get to the question and answer period. Just go ahead and shoot it on in anytime. All right, we'll give you guys about 10 seconds more to make your choice, and then we'll close out the poll and you guys can have a conversation about the results. Okay, let's see. Let's go ahead and close it now in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right, results are on your screen. Looks like SAFE is the clear winner.
That was pretty interesting because just over half the audience voted. We've got about 155 online at the moment, so that's around what, 80, 90 people. And yeah, that's not unexpected, I would say. What do you guys think?
I think SAFE was the early adopter, SAFE was the early mover, and that just makes it easier to use SAFE for a lot of these folks that they don't really have experience with a lot of the other functions yet.
And I think SAFE has some really good people that have helped move it forward. And I think people have it's prescriptive enough that you can kind of start from where you are, and it sort of ticks all the box of helping address the perceived failings of Agile. You still can have a organized planning with the program increments. You can still have the coordinated visibility, because now you've got new concept of, hey, I've got Agile release trains, and I can then schedule those. I can still add governance to it. There's a lot of goodness that comes out of that as basically a help tool. What I find interesting also in the poll, though, is that 25% of people, 24%, said that they're not doing, any of these models, that it's more something else, something other than that, which is also good. It is to say, hey, we're adopting methodology to match what we need.
Well, maybe they're not. We don't know that, actually. They could be doing no Agile at scale, I guess, but without more data, what we know. But yeah, SAFE leading, Scrum of Scrums, not that far behind. I would argue that Scrum of Scrums may be predated SAFE, perhaps. But, yeah.
So SAFE actually includes a Scrum of Scrums in their weekly delivery. Although it's not the full model that you get together and the Scrum Masters will talk.
Oh. Let's talk about SAFE and DevOps then. So we introduced this concept earlier about SAFE having karma rather than CALMS as their acronym. Now the CALMS acronym arrived in our DevOps space after Damon Edwards and John Willis had the first DevOps days in Mountain View in California, which was I think the second or third in the world. And afterwards they sat down and said, what's this DevOps thing all about? And they came up with CAMS originally for culture, automation, measurement and sharing. And then Jez Humble, the author of Continuous Delivery with Dave Farley and co-author of DevOps Handbook, added the L for lean later. When SAFE introduced it, they changed it to karma. So I think my first question for Siddharth, is it SAFE versus DevOps, or is it SAFE and DevOps?
I like this slide heading, and why I like this, because it did not say SAFE versus DevOps. It talked about SAFE and DevOps. And that is what really means is. And for the viewers, and this question comes to me in my NatWest group, asking many people that SAFE talks about X, DevOps talk about Y, which we should prefer. So once for all, and may not be the last one, let me clarify where SAFE plays the picture and where DevOps does it. So when we talk about value begins with an idea or theory of what a customer wants. And to ensure that the final products align with your customers' expectations, their needs, which must be constantly addressed and measured. But meanwhile, those systems and technologies needs to be continuously designed and continuously integrated by your agile teams. And on the other hand, which is on the right, it should be continuously delivered to production where they can be tested and await the result of the business decisions. The work that happens from a moment a developer tests the code to the time it's in production is based on what DevOps transformation is all about. But that is just part of the job. What it takes to mature an idea which is lacking and creation on the left-hand side, and what it takes to operate and calculate a solution on the other end. You can't, you can't really grasp whether the work should have done offers value or not until you have really assessed the hypothesis based on the actual user results. So trying an agile transition, for example, without DevOps or vice versa is one of the most common mistakes that people do in their organization. Agile, from my view, without DevOps produces quality work that cannot be produced quickly enough to the client. So the final economical benefit are not really obtained. In comparison, DevOps without Agile offers an underused pipeline at best. So Agile teams execute maybe a wrong stuff quicker at the worst. So to achieve value, you need both Agile and you both need DevOps. And this type of effort requires not only Dev and Ops, but also everyone in your value stream, from your product management to your audits, to your compliance, to your security, to your quality, to your testing, and of course, your Dev and Ops. And that is where, to sum up what I want to say, that is where your culture, your automation, your lean flow, your measurement, and your recovery, which is calmer approach of scaled, agile, holistic approach, plays a role along with DevOps.
So
Was a bit long, but I thought of
no,
putting
that's
it to rest.
clear. So, Mark, if you agree that SAFe and DevOps, it's an and, not a versus, that's cool. If you don't, say so why. But answer this question as well. Is recovery more important than sharing?
I don't think recovery is more important than sharing. I think SAFe adopted recovery in line with their overall model of being able to scale Agile, right? And that the fact that you can recover gives some confidence and some sense of trust to those higher levels of those enterprise, that solution level, that business level, that when they let the DevOps go out there and they let the devs go out there and make these new things and push them into production 10 times a day or 50 times a day, they can pull it back, right? That it's not all free and it's not all Wild West, but there's actually some sense of being able to pull back, to manage those risks and reduce the risk so that they can feel comfortable going forward. Like with Siddharth and the banking apps, right? You don't want to put a banking app and then say, oh, it left all the public information out there, and now we can't do anything until we get to the next update. You want to feel like you can call it back, like you can have that blue-green or that canary release. And SAFe really wants to emphasize that even though you're moving to DevOps and you're moving to this new culture to move faster, you still have some legacy components where you can pull back if you need to. You can measure it into your framework so that you don't have to completely lose control to go into this full development model dozens of times a day. So I think they're both equally important, but where the sharing in the DevOps model says we share because everyone has shared responsibilities, shared vision, and shared delivery. The recovery talks more to those higher levels, that art, that business, that solution set, where they can pull it back. They don't necessarily agree with what the developers are pushing out.
Just to two-liners for it. This question do turns up. DevOps is talking about sharing, SAFe is talking about recovery, which is more important. And I would like to let the viewers know is, if you get into the SAFe framework, you will find sharing is the underlying theme in every bit of aspect, whether it is culture, automation, lead, measurement, and recovery. So they're not talking at most individually as a sharing concept, but they do talk about, touch upon, and imply sharing in every aspect of the calmer approach.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And part of it is marketing. We've adopted it, we've changed it a little bit. See how we've adjusted this to our new framework that you can get special training on when you go forward and integrate with SAFe.
It's actually, I'm going to draw attention to one of the questions from the audience. One of the tensions we're living in is how much autonomy to grant to a team as opposed to a level of standardization across the organization. For example, it's not practical to allow each team to pick their own agile tools and value in planning and scaling to standardize on one. Any advice on how to calibrate autonomy versus standardization?
I don't think you need to let people use different tools along the way. And that's part of that scale, right? Because you can have everybody kind of in the same generic tool framework as you move forward while still allowing them to produce different products. Especially for infrastructure, for the infrastructure as code, for making sure that things happen. You really want to build into a central thing. Now you can move your whole organization to a new framework. You should use your innovation time to adapt to new tools, to be looking at new tools that are out there. So you're kind of constantly on the edge. But it's all part of it. We even talked about, when you talk about microservices and the monolith versus microservices, right? That you use that strangler pattern to break the dependencies and go forward. There's kind of elements of both. The problem is not using too many tools. The problem is that organizations buy a tool and then say, this is what the mandate is going to be for everyone, instead of letting the developers kind of figure out where they want to be as they move forward.
Mm-hmm.
What we say, this question frequently comes up in our DevOps Center of Excellence practice, that are you binding us with X tool? We say we're not binding with the X tool. But if you think there is a better Y tool which serves better service than the X tool which is there existingly, make a business case for it, and we'll ensure that this tool becomes a bank-wide tool for everyone to practice. But you should have a strong business case to it. They're not binding for you, but do come up of how people can, adopt not only you, but the other folks within the bank.
So I like the concept of having tool categories and allowing some variance in teams according to what their platforms might be in terms of the specific tools they use in categories, having some kind of, and I think we'll come back to this with Jeff later, some kind of guardrails around metrics that are common across teams, even if there's some variation in terms of the frameworks that they use in terms of agility. But let's come back to that in a little bit, because I think we will naturally. Let's talk about this one. Mark, is SAFe about managing dependencies and DevOps is about breaking dependencies? Is that the difference between these two things?
Well, there certainly is a mindset, right? Because as you have the individual development teams, they're breaking their dependencies as much as possible moving forward. What we're SAFe is letting everybody know that it kind of fits into the framework. Your teams are working into that ARC structure, that agile release train. So even though you're breaking them, you're not breaking them as fast. You have that ability to reach back and call out in items that depend on each other to get done. When you think about the developers using SAFe, they're kind of making changes into a VM or into a process or into something that they're not changing the whole thing at once. Each team is making a couple of changes, and those changes have to be able to integrate through the product owner through the art. Whereas developers, you're kind of a more free form in moving forward. In either case, it has to deliver to the vision of those dependencies for what goes forward. If you're not aware of what your dependencies are, then you can't either manage or break them. And too often you get people looking at, they'll look at the process, they'll look at the pipeline, they'll look at the code, and they'll go, well, that's not a dependency, that's just it's a feature, not a bug, instead of trying to break those things as they move forward.
Is that myopia caused by some kind of institutionalization?
I don't think it's institutionalization. I think it's just people. When you're working on something right in front of you, you tend to get heads down and fix it. When you're looking at the code and fixing things in code, you're fixing what makes that code work. And if you call on somebody else's library or call on somebody else's data, you create the dependency, even though it makes life easier for you moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think ultimately the goal of, when you look at companies that have been really successful at delivery, there's some common patterns that start to emerge. The level of automation of the pipelines are faster. The amount of automation and how much quality interrogation is shifted left. If you can imagine, if you were going to go create a new startup, a software startup that's a small company, you probably wouldn't adopt SAFe for that small company. You're a small team. You don't need all the rigor and process because the number of dependencies is less. And so, the ideal of where DevOps takes us is to say, look, the further you break those dependencies, the more autonomous you can truly be, and that's freeing. There's less to worry about, less, your blast radius when you deploy is smaller. But then, like you said, Mark, you need to be able to leverage other people. And how do you accomplish all that? Well, that's the kind of the point of the journey that we're on, of going from monolithic to completely autonomous, is to make all that just work by breaking these dependencies. And yet most companies aren't there. Most companies are in this world where legacy systems may have been around for 60, 80 years that we're trying to somehow integrate into the process without making them melt down. It's interesting. One of the questions that we have on the panel here is, addresses exactly this point. It's a discovery kind of question. And it's from Peter, and he says, there are 12 Agile principles. What is your Agile process if not the SAFe framework? And that question highlights the mentality of, hey, I've always worked in this big company, and I can see it. There's other sides of that I know I've talked to, like people that just their mind are blown when they look at scaled agile. They're like, there's no way I might as well be doing waterfall if I do that, and there's no way I would do a process that deep. I get both perspectives, and both are right in understanding where they're at. But there's a journey here that's fascinating that we're trying to get on.
I would like to take Peter's question. What we've done in NatWest Group is we have built up our own, the safe agile principles, so as to say. So, for example, we have said that we will have incremental customer value over big bang deliveries. We will have long life persistence teams over temporary project-based team, which Agile talks about. One of the other principles I can think of is we will have rolling wave planning on strategic themes over annual planning. We will have early learning and continuous delivery over late discoveries. So what I want to call out is, for all the viewers is that you don't have to restrict for within those 12 agile principles. If you really want to scale agile, you develop your own organizational principles as well, which is perfectly fine.
Precisely.
So I think what we're getting to is all organizations are in some kind of transition from waterfall to agile, from a monolithic legacy architecture to something more loosely coupled, from legacy to cloud native. All sorts of things are going on. And it looks like DevOps is kind of like an advanced way of working or advanced capability, but SAFe is a framework that helps us move. So Dr. Mark Peters, we've quoted you on this slide. Tell us more.
So when we were chatting the other day, and it kind of came up, and analogies are always good, right? Life is about stories. So when you say that SAFe is the base camp and DevOps is a summit, we've talked about SAFe kind of provides those guardrails. It gives you a structure where you can make a transformation that's not kind of a free form. It provides those guides on the path to get forward. If you think about a base camp, from climbing a mountain, from going to Everest, from going to any mountain, you set out your water, you set out your path, you set out your pack, you figure out what you have, you figure out how much time it's going to take. But getting to the summit is all on your own, right? When you get to the summit, it's only a small element of that team that's at base camp that actually makes it to the summit that gets to move forward. And that's kind of the same thing with SAFe. SAFe provides those guardrails, and when you move into a DevOps, you get rid of those guardrails. You know what to do, and it's kind of intrinsic. It's integrated into you personally. You can have those blame-free retrospectives. You know how to move it forward. Helen, I think we even had a conversation this morning about telemetry and where you manage metrics and what's humane about managing metrics. And if you can tie all the metrics to an individual dev, is that surveillance or is that really what happens? Well, it's only surveillance if you blame the person. But if you just know how those things are going forward, then it's part of that telemetry everywhere that you want. And that's a really scary prospect for a lot of people, because they think the next step, if I put too many bad elements of code in, if I put too many, if I have too much tech debt in the code I submit, well, that's that individual and we're going to get rid of him. Well, no, we're going to figure out how our organization moves forward, how we get to that summit through doing the small increments, through making those changes as we move forward, and getting to our DevOps through managing our KPIs and our telemetry everywhere.
And that conversation you and I were having on Twitter was very much around the cultural and leadership aspects. I think we lose kind of sight of them often in these conversations, but I can see questions coming in from the audience. So Nicholas, how does SAFe address organizational transformation as we find changing the culture as well as not remaining rigidly aligned with organizational structure proves difficult? Siddharth, what's happening at NatWest to change leadership behaviors in order to propagate changes in organizational design?
I spoke, in the earlier bit of slide that our group is 400 years and have been changing with as the customers are changing, for the customers, by the customers, and of the customers always. So what we've done is we wanted to move away from that traditional way of working, and very recently we have introduced a framework which is known as idea to value framework. And what it talks about, it talks about different layers based on definitely the same framework, we have built an enterprise portfolio layer, the top layer, which talks about enterprise strategies and goals, franchises, investments, and themes. Next, we brought is the cross-domain portfolio alignment, which talks about how different domains can prioritize and integrate work among themselves wherever required. Third layer we have brought across is known as domain portfolio. So domain strategies, outcomes, demands, and ongoing planning happens. The fourth layer we talked about is a platform release train, which talks about concurrent and ongoing planning. And the last stage is the feature teams, which talks about the real delivery and the operations. So that is what I could share, that we have brought up this framework out of many rigorous years, months of effort that has been put in. Primarily inspired by SAFe, but definitely other scaling agile frameworks did help us out.
And I want to ask you a couple of related questions from the audience as well before we move on to the poll, because we are getting close to the wire on time.
So Helen, I want to jump in real quick and talk real fast. When we talk about SAFe and making the SAFe transformation, one of the biggest problems I see is that these big companies that want to adopt SAFe don't want to leave it alone once they put it in place. When you decide you want to adopt and there's an element of your organization you want to move to SAFe, you've got to train them and you've got to say, all right, you're going to take 3 months and you're going to train and you're going to do a half a sprint or a half an iteration of what moves forward. And then the next 3 months, you're going to get to MVP. And during that time, my business people aren't going to ask any questions. They're going to wait for you to get your process down. They're going to wait for you to find out velocity. And then that next one, that 6 months into it, we're going to actually expect to get delivery. We're expect to get full delivery of what the features are, but giving those teams enough time to self-organize and find out how they move forward, and that the organizations don't allow them enough time to do that. And things start breaking right away, which is where you get the reversion to the old practices.
Okay, so talking about kind of the measurement, I guess, of that sort of improvement that Mark's talking about, a couple of questions for Siddharth from the audience. One is about relating strategic objectives. If we could just go back to the previous slide for a second, how do we relate strategic objective OKRs? So we're talking about the aligning vision of OKRs and KPIs. So what I think what Mark was just saying about the business understanding that they're getting what they want. And there was another related question from the audience, which was at NatWest, how do you measure the business value? So let's talk about OKRs and KPIs, and let's talk about business value, and then we'll move on to the poll.
Well, I'll hop in with that because, you know, that's the reason you implement a value stream management solution, so that you can get metrics and delivery and manage the process regardless of wherever you're at. It's funny, you know, if a tree falls in a forest but nobody's there to hear it, you know, did it actually make a sound? If you made improvements in your pipeline but don't have metrics to actually demonstrate it, can you really prove that you've done things better? There's so much that really ought to be aligned to the metrics of delivery and looking at the right metrics so that you can focus on where the problems are in your value delivery, recognizing the proper definition of value that's going through the system. You need to be able to see that in a way that's transparent, automatic, just flowing through the system. And measuring and deciding what metrics are the most important is probably that's the most important step. You know, is it truly your deployment frequency? Is it looking at the story points going through? Is it how well and how autonomous the teams are, and making sure that they're able to self-organize well enough? There's so much here that you'll need to kind of go through to figure out.
To add to it, what we've done in NatWest Group, and a quick thing is we have, you know, giving focus on what the customer values rather than what we value. For example, the lead delivery time is valuable for the organization, not maybe for the customers. The change failure rate may be valuable for us, but not for the customers. For customers, right, what matters is value. And for the service provider, what should matter is happiness factor. So if people talk about DORA matrix, two things which misses out in DORA matrix is the happiness quotient and the value quotient. Please see how you can bring that as a measurable. Leave aside change failure rate, leave aside mean time to recovery. At the end, that doesn't matter. Trust me.
a poll and then a wind up, I think. Yeah, Charlene.
Okay, the polling question should be up on your screen now. The question is, are you using SAFe and DevOps? You can select from yes, we are using both together. Yes, we are using both, but they are separate initiatives. We are only using SAFe, we are only using DevOps, or we aren't using either. Go ahead and make your decision, make your choice, and we will close out the poll in about 30 seconds or so and take a look at the results. Just a quick reminder also that we are recording today's session, so if you missed any or all of it, you will have the opportunity to access it later on demand. We are going to be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. The webinar is also going to be on the devops.com website, so you can always go look for it there. Just go to devops.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll. In the interest of time, we'll take a look at the results. Okay. Looks
Very
like
interesting. So we've got, 35% saying that they're using both together, 26% using both but separate initiatives, and then a similar amount using one or the other, but only 6% using neither. Mark, is that common to your observations in the market?
Usually you adopt SAFe because you purchase SAFe, right? You get people trained. So using both as separate initiatives really confuses me, that the fact that you would have a SAFe group in your organization and a DevOps group in your organization.
Yep. We see it all the time. It's exactly right, Mark. You know, it's confusing to me, but you know, I'll see a center of excellence for around SAFe and pushing it out in the organization, another center of excellence around DevOps and pushing it out in the organization. It confuses me too, and it exists.
I like the idea that we could say our organization is committed to DevOps as a culture and as a philosophy, and that we are using SAFe to get there versus being separate. Yeah.
Nicholas in the questions summed it up right. You know, the PMO office says, hey, we're going to go with SAFe and, you know, start down that path. But the dev team's already, you know, barreling down the path of DevOps. And so these things have to come together. That is the point. We just have a couple of minutes. I wanted to hit just a couple of topics of how this relates to value streams, and just touch on a couple of key pieces, and we'll have some final thoughts. But the whole point is, you know, we're moving from centrally coordinated releases via, you know, these agile release trains where we're defining these up, and these things come together because of the dependencies. That's important, and that's critical to make sure you get right. But the ultimate goal we're trying to get to is to have, in essence, broken dependencies, autonomous teams completely that are completely cross-functional as much as they can be, still adhering to the governance and compliance kinds of things that have to be in. And as we do that, we want to move those things forward. Really, there's core challenges that are faced regardless of your methodology of looking across individual pipelines, be able to see across the portfolio, and having in place a way to manage delivery regardless of the level of maturity, whether it be DevOps or Agile or scaled Agile, or even for those pipelines that still need to be waterfall. That's okay. And the point is this is the domain of where value stream management comes in. Value stream management says, I don't care. And as a solution, we'll homogenize all these different methodologies. And it does that by, in essence, connecting into the various levels. We ran out of time here, but let me hit one just other piece here, and I'll come back to it. And that's value stream management platforms, which truly take data across the pipelines and aggregate them together into a single place where you can see and have visibility for every single pipeline. That's what Plutora does as a vendor. That's why I'm excited about this topic. If you're on a SAFe journey and you're still trying to combine together your DevOps side of the house with your Agile or scaled Agile and get visibility, that's exactly what we do. That's why I love this conversation. There's no wrong answer here. Wherever you are in this journey, use value stream management to help you. our platform is a cloud-based solution that basically integrates data across that and puts it together so that you can have visibility and manage the transformation. Let me jump here. Boy, we're running out of time fast here, aren't we?
Yep.
I keep telling you guys need to do a 90-minute webinar because this happens every single time. So
when will we learn?
Yeah. So can I steal the mic from you, Mike? From Jeff?
Mm-hmm.
I can speak. So real quick, we did do a drawing for the 4 Amazon gift card winners. We're just going to be following up with those folks via email to get their gift card out to them since we have run out of time. But I do want to thank you guys for being a part of such a great panel as always. And do want to just a quickly reminder to the audience that if you missed any or all of the webinar, we will be sending out a link to access the webinar on demand for you. So, but again, thank you guys for taking part in today's webinar, and also a quick thank you to the audience. And this is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I gotta close it out now. I apologize, but hope everybody has a great day and please stay safe.